All right, welcome everyone to Rad Onc Smart Review, the RadBio edition.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're really digging into something absolutely core to radiation therapy. It's this idea of repair over time.
It's all about how cells, handle the damage from radiation as time passes after the exposure.
Yeah, and we're going to break down some key mechanisms. We'll be looking at sublethal damage repair,
Right?
potentially lethal damage repair,
Yep.
and also the dose rate effect, how the speed of delivery changes things.
Exactly. And understanding these is just, it's fundamental. It's how we try to kill the cancer while sparing the healthy tissue.
It really is the tightrope walk, isn't it? Getting that balance right.
Absolutely. So let's start with the basics. When radiation hits a cell, the damage isn't all the same. We usually think of it in three ways:
Okay.
lethal, sublethal, and potentially lethal damage.
Lethal seems pretty obvious. That's the kind of that the cell just can't recover from. Game over.
Pretty much. It's irreversible damage. It inevitably leads to cell death. The cell can't divide anymore, can't function, done.
Okay.
Now, sublethal damage, that's more interesting. This is damage the cell can actually fix.
Oh, okay. So it's not immediately fatal?
Right. Usually it can repair it within a few hours if it doesn't get hit by more radiation too soon.
Like getting a dent in your car fixable if you get it to the shop.
That's a good analogy. But if you get another dent right after, before fixing the first one,
Then the combined damage might be too much.
exactly. That unrepaired sublethal damage can interact with damage from a subsequent dose, and together they can become lethal.
And this is what explains that initial shoulder on the cell survival curves we always see, especially for things like X-rays.
Precisely. For low LET radiation, that shoulder represents the cell's ability to absorb and repair some of this sublethal damage before the killing really kicks in effectively.
So it's not just a shape on a graph. It's biology happening. It's repair.
It is, and this whole concept, sublethal damage repair, is really the cornerstone of fractionated radiotherapy.
The reason we give small doses day after day.
Right. We're exploiting the fact that normal tissues can often repair the sublethal damage better or faster between those fractions, while hopefully the cumulative damage overwhelms the tumor.
Giving the good guys time to recover between hits.
You got it. And the classic lab experiments that show this are the split dose experiments.
Right, where you give a dose, wait, then give another.
Exactly. Give it dose, let some time pass for repair, give the second part, and compare survival to giving the whole dose at once. More survival with the split dose means repair happened.
Okay, that makes sense for sublethal. Now, what about this potentially lethal damage? The name suggests it's a bit iffy.
It is a bit. Potentially lethal damage, or PLD, is damage that, it would likely kill the cell if it was trying to grow normally afterwards. But, and this is the key part, if you change the cell's environment after the radiation, make things less ideal for growth.
You can change the outcome.
You can influence whether that damage actually becomes lethal or if the cell manages to repair it.
Huh. What kind of environmental changes are we talking about?
Things that slow down or stop cell division. So in the lab, maybe you keep the cells really crowded, what we call density inhibited or contact inhibited.
So they naturally stop growing.
Right. Or you might hold them in old medium without fresh nutrients, basically suboptimal conditions.
And under those less than ideal conditions, they repair better.
It seems so. The idea is that the cell not being pushed to divide can maybe focus its resources on repair, like you resting when you're sick instead of trying to run a race.
Okay, so in experiments, if you irradiate cells, then keep them crowded or starved for a while before letting them grow out.
You often see higher survival than if you immediately gave them perfect growth conditions right after irradiation. That delay allows for PLD repair.
Does this happen in, real tumors too?
Well, it's been observed in vivo as well. For instance, in large, dense tumors where cells might naturally be in suboptimal conditions, delaying the assessment of cell survival after irradiation can sometimes show higher survival, suggesting PLD repair might be occurring there too.
Interesting. Is it a totally separate repair pathway, or is it linked to other things?
That's actually still debated a bit. Some think it's distinct, others think it might be more related to cells pausing in certain parts of the cell cycle. But mechanism aside, it's definitely a concept you need to know, particularly for boards. The key is remembering it's about post-irradiation conditions affecting repair.
Got it. Suboptimal conditions post-irradiation can boost survival by allowing PLD repair. Okay, so we know these repair processes exist. What about the timing? How fast does this stuff happen? Let's start with sublethal damage repair.
Okay, so for SLD repair, based on those split dose studies, like the famous ones by Elkind and Sutton with CHO cells.
Chinese hamster ovary cells, right?
Right. In vitro, in cell culture, this repair is actually remarkably fast. Most of it happens within just, say, 1 to 2 hours.
Wow, only an hour or two.
Yeah, the cellular repair crews get to work pretty quickly. After maybe maybe up to 4 hours in some systems, survival often plateaus in those split dose experiments, meaning most of the repairable damage from the first dose has been fixed.
So separating fractions by just a few hours gives significant time for this repair.
Absolutely. Now, if you wait much longer between fractions, other things can start happening, like cells moving into different, maybe more sensitive or resistant phases of the cell cycle. That's reassortment.
All right.
And if the gap is really long, days even, then cells might start dividing again, repopulation. But the core SLD repair itself is quick.
And does it take longer in, say, a mouse than in a petri dish?
Generally, yes. In vivo studies, looking at tissues in mice, for example, often suggest the repair takes a bit longer to reach completion, maybe more like 4 to 6 hours between fractions to see the maximum sparing effect.
Makes sense. A whole organism is more complex. What about the timing for potentially lethal damage repair?
For PLD repair, remember this is happening when cells are held in those suboptimal conditions after irradiation. The increase in survival you see from this repair is largely complete within about 6 to 8 hours.
So keeping them in those poor conditions for longer than, say, 8 hours doesn't really help much more for this specific repair.
Generally, no. The major benefit from PLD repair seems to occur within that initial 6 to 8 hour window post-radiation.
Okay. SLD repair, quick couple hours in vitro, maybe 4, 6 in vivo. PLD repair needs suboptimal conditions, maybe 6, 8 hours. Got it. Now, let's shift to something with huge clinical implications. The dose rate effect.
Ah, yes. Absolutely critical concept.
It's all about the speed of delivery, right? How fast or slow you give the radiation dose.
Exactly. The dose rate effect basically states that for low LET radiation like photons, delivering the same total dose slowly at a low dose rate is generally less effective at killing cells.
So more cells survive if you drip the dose in slowly compared to hitting them with it all at once.
Precisely. More survival at low dose rates compared to high dose rates or acute exposure.
And why is that? Does it connect back to repair?
It connects directly back to sublethal damage repair. When the radiation is delivered slowly over a long period, the cells have time to repair that sublethal damage while the radiation is still ongoing.
Ah, so they're fixing themselves during the exposure.
Exactly. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a leaky hose. If the leak repair is fast enough relative to the filling dose rate, the bucket takes much longer to fill or might never overflow. This ongoing repair makes the cells effectively more resistant.
So what does this do to our survival curve?
It makes the curve shallower. The slope decreases, meaning you need a higher total dose at that low dose rate to achieve the same level of cell kill as you would with an acute dose.
And the shoulder.
The shoulder tends to become less pronounced or even disappear at very low dose rates because that initial damage is being repaired as it's formed, so it doesn't accumulate in the same way.
And we see this effect both in the lab and in living systems.
Oh, absolutely. In vitro, if you look at survival curves for many different human cell lines irradiated at various dose rates, you'll see this pattern clearly. The curves get shallower as the dose rate drops.
Any classic in vivo examples?
The jejunal crypt cell assay in mice is a textbook example. Junum is part of the small intestine. Its lining cells divide rapidly and are quite radiosensitive.
Okay.
Studies show clearly that as you decrease the dose rate used to irradiate the mouse gut, the dose required to achieve a certain level of crypt cell depletion goes up significantly. More survival, less damage at lower dose rates.
Is there a specific range of dose rates where this effect is most noticeable?
Yeah, it's most dramatic typically in the range between about, say, 1 gray per minute down to maybe 0.01 gray per minute.
What happens outside that range, like really fast or really slow?
Well, above 1 gray per minute, things happen so quickly that there's virtually no time for repair during the exposure. It's essentially an acute dose. And below about 0.01 gray per minute, you often don't see much additional sparing. Maybe the repair systems are already working at maximum capacity, or maybe at those very long exposure times, cell division, proliferation starts to happen, which could counteract the sparing effect.
Right, other biological processes kick in. And does every cell type show the same amount of dose rate effect?
No, definitely not. There's significant variability. Some cells are much better at repairing damage during prolonged exposure than others. So the magnitude of the dose rate effect, how much sparing you see, can differ quite a bit between cell types.
Okay, so generally slower is sparer. But you mentioned an exception earlier, the inverse dose rate effect. Sounds backwards.
It is backwards compared to the general rule. It's a fascinating phenomenon.
Yeah.
For certain cell lines, the classic example is HeLa-3 cells.
Okay.
Within a specific narrow range of low dose rates, decreasing the dose rate actually leads to more cell killing. It flips the usual trend.
Whoa. More killing when you slow it down. How does that work?
The leading hypothesis involves the cell cycle. The idea is that at these particular low dose rates, the radiation causes damage, triggering cell cycle checkpoints, particularly arresting cells in the G2 or M phase.
And G2M is a sensitive phase, right?
Exactly. It's one of the most radiosensitive phases. So if the low dose rate irradiation causes cells to pile up or accumulate in G2M without killing them outright very quickly, they become sort of sitting ducks. They're held in this vulnerable state for longer during the ongoing irradiation.
Making them more likely to be killed by subsequent hits.
That's the idea. More accumulation in G2M leads to increased overall cell killing compared to slightly higher dose rates where maybe they wouldn't pile up as much, or lower dose rates where maybe proliferation escapes the block.
So it's like trapping them in a weak spot.
That's a good way to put it. It's definitely a more specialized topic, but important to know for exams, especially that link to G2M accumulation. And it might have some relevance in tissues like the testes, where odd dose rate responses have sometimes been noted.
Always exceptions in biology.
All right.
Okay, so we've got these repair mechanisms, the time courses, the dose rate effects. How does this all directly influence what we actually do in the clinic?
Oh, profoundly. Let's start with the sublethal damage repair. It's the absolute bedrock justification for standard fractionation in external beam radiotherapy.
Right, giving 1.8 or 2 grays a day for weeks.
Exactly. That whole strategy is designed to allow normal tissues time to repair SLD between fractions, while the tumor hopefully accumulates damage. The choice of fractionation schedule standard versus hyperfractionation is all about manipulating this differential repair capacity.
Balancing tumor control and normal tissue toxicity based on repair.
Precisely. Then you have the dose rate effect, which is central to brachytherapy decisions.
Low dose rate versus high dose rate brachy.
Absolutely. With low dose rate LDR brachytherapy, where you leave radioactive sources in for days.
Right, like permanent seed implants or temporary longer implants.
You are deliberately using a low dose rate to maximize that continuous sublethal damage repair in the surrounding normal tissues. You get a high total dose to the tumor, but the slow delivery spares the neighbors.
Okay.
Whereas with high dose rate HDR brachytherapy, the dose rate during each treatment fraction is very high.
So minimal repair during the fraction.
Correct. With HDR, the sparing of normal tissues relies much more on the fractionation schedule itself, breaking the total dose into multiple HDR fractions, separated by enough time for repair, similar to external beam.
And what about particle therapy? Protons, carbon ions, they have high LAT. Does repair work the same way?
No, and that's a key difference. High LET radiation causes more complex, clustered damage that's much harder for cells to repair. There's significantly less sublethal damage repair.
So that shoulder on the survival curve is smaller or gone.
Exactly. Which means the rationale for extensive fractionation based on normal tissue SLD repair is less compelling than with photons. This is one reason why fractionation schedules for particle therapy can sometimes be different, often involving fewer fractions or hypofractionation.
Makes sense. Less repair means less benefit from splitting the dose in the same way. Okay, let's crystallize some of this with our clinical pearls. Key takeaways.
Sounds good. Pearl number 1, sublethal damage repair. It's the radiobiological reason fractionation works, especially for sparing normal tissues with low LET radiation.
Pearl number 2, potentially lethal damage repair. This reminds us that what happens after irradiation, the cell's environment, can actually influence survival. Not something we target much clinically yet, but important conceptually.
Pearl number 3, the dose rate effect, specifically for LDR. Low dose rates generally spare cells more because repair happens during the exposure. This is the principle behind LDR brachytherapy's therapeutic ratio.
And pearl number 4, Don't forget the inverse dose rate effect for exams. That weird situation where lower dose rates kill more in some cells, likely due to trapping them in the sensitive G2M phase.
Right. Remember HeLa S3 and G2M block?
Okay, great, Pearl. Now, connecting these directly to treatment techniques, we touched on some already.
Yeah, so standard external beam, like we said, relies heavily on allowing time between fractions for normal tissue SLD repair. Daily small doses leverage this.
LDR brachytherapy.
LDR brachy directly uses the dose rate effect. Continuous low-dose delivery maximizes normal tissue repair while the tumor gets cooked over time.
HDR brachytherapy.
HDR brachy uses high dose rates, so minimal repair during treatment. Sparing comes from the fractionation between the HDR sessions and the sharp dose fall-off.
And particle therapy.
Particle therapy, with high LAT, has less SLD repair. This changes the game for fractionation, potentially allowing for shorter, more hypofractionated schedules compared to photons, as the differential repair benefit is reduced.
Excellent overview. Ready for a quick board blitz? Test ourselves.
Let's do it. Fire away.
Question 1. Split-dose experiments show increased survival with low LET radiation separated in time. This is mainly due to repair of what type of damage? A. Lethal. B. Potentially lethal. C. Sublethal. D. Indirect.
That's got to be C, sublethal damage. The time gap allows for SLD repair.
Correct. Question 2. If you irradiate cells and then hold them in, say, nutrient-poor conditions afterwards, what type of repair are you most likely enhancing? A. Sublethal. B. Lethal. C. Potentially lethal. D. Reassortment.
Holding them in suboptimal conditions post-irradiation. That's the definition of promoting C, potentially lethal damage repair.
Spot on. Question 3. The inverse dose rate effect, where lower dose rates cause more killing, is thought to be caused by cells accumulating in which cell cycle phase? A. G1, B. S, C. G2M, or D. G0.
That was the G2M phase, the radiosensitive one, so C.
Correct again. Last one, question 4. Which type of radiation generally shows the least amount of sublethal damage repair? A. Low LT. B. High LT. C. Orthovoltage X-rays. D. Gamma rays.
The dense damage from high LT radiation is harder to fix, so B. High LT.
Perfect score. Okay, just wrapping up. Are there any major controversies or advances related to repair that we should be aware of?
Well, there's always ongoing research into optimizing fractionation. People are looking at really tailored schedules, maybe based on tumor type or even individual patient repair capacity, trying to widen that therapeutic window.
Using different timings or doses per fraction.
Exactly. Or combining radiation with drugs that might inhibit repair specifically in tumor cells, making them more sensitive, while hopefully not affecting normal tissues as much. Radiosensitizers targeting repair pathways.
And anything moving on the potentially lethal damage front.
It's still more preclinical, but there's interest in understanding if we could exploit PLD repair differences. For example, tumors often have hypoxic regions where cells might rely more on certain repair pathways, including potentially PLD-like repair. Could we target that?
Fascinating. Still lots to figure out there. Okay, let's do a super quick recap of the main points on repair over time.
All right, first, sublethal damage repair. Cells can fix some low LET damage if given time. This is the basis for fractionation.
Second, potentially lethal damage repair. Outcome depends on post-irradiation conditions. Suboptimal environment can allow repair.
Third, the dose rate effect. Generally, slower delivery, low dose rate of low LET radiation means less killing due to ongoing SLD repair. Key for LDR brachy.
Fourth, inverse dose rate effect. The exception. Very low rates can sometimes increase killing by trapping cells in G2M. Remember that one for boards.
And finally, high LET radiation means much late repair, both SLD and PLD, which impacts how we use things like protons and carbon ions, especially regarding fractionation.
Excellent summary. That covers the essentials of repair over time. Remember, you can complete practice oral boards over at radoncxsmartlearn.com. And definitely subscribe to Rad Onc Smart Review for our next deep dive.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Keep thinking about that repair.
See you next time.